My name is Claire Anderson, and I am 32 years old. Before I start telling you this story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Drop it in the comments because I love knowing how far these stories reach across the world. And as you listen, I'd also like you to rate the story from 1 to 10 at the end because your opinion truly matters. Now, let me take you into the most personal and painful chapter of my life, a story about family, betrayal, money, and what it means to find your own worth when the people who are supposed to love you most are the very ones who call you a failure. Growing up, I thought my parents were like everyone else's, flawed, yes, but still protective and fair. But over time, I came to realize that fairness was never in their dictionary. My younger brother Michael was always the golden child, the son who could do no wrong. And me? I was the daughter who worked hard, who sacrificed, who stayed up late studying, who helped around the house, but somehow I was invisible. No matter how many achievements I stacked, they were never enough compared to what Michael did. The favoritism started small, bigger slices of cake, extra gifts at Christmas, excuses made when he messed up at school. But as we grew older, the difference grew sharper and crueler. I watched as they poured every ounce of encouragement, every ounce of money, every ounce of belief into him, while I was treated like a spare part in my own family. But nothing prepared me for the day they handed him $230,000 and called me a failure in the same breath. That day, something inside me broke, and it changed the course of my life forever. I remember that day with painful clarity, as though it were burned into my memory with fire. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I had driven to my parents' house because they said they had something important to discuss. I thought maybe it was about their retirement, or maybe about a family trip, or even something as simple as reorganizing the house. I walked in with a smile, carrying a small cake from a bakery I knew my mother loved, just as a gesture to brighten the day. But the air was already heavy. Michael was sitting on the couch, legs stretched out arrogantly, flipping through his phone with that smug grin he always carried. My father cleared his throat in that way he does when he thinks he's about to announce something profound. He looked at me with his serious eyes and said, "Claire, your brother has an incredible opportunity. He's been thinking about starting his own business, and as parents, it's our responsibility to help him succeed." My heart was still open then. I nodded, expecting they'd ask me for advice, since I had a business degree and years of experience. But then he continued, "We've decided to invest in Michael. We're giving him $230,000 to get started." I froze. The number was so exact, so huge, that it rang in my ears like an alarm bell. I glanced at Michael, who smirked and shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My mother chimed in sweetly, "He deserves it, Claire. He's always had such vision. You understand, don't you?" But before I could even form words, my father added the knife twist. "You've never really made anything of yourself. We can't keep waiting for you to succeed. We need to put our resources where they'll actually matter." My hands went cold, the cake box trembling slightly as I set it down. I wanted to scream that I had worked 2 jobs through college, that I had paid my own rent, that I had supported them when they were struggling, that I had spent years being their shoulder, their helper, their mate even, but none of it counted in their eyes. I was invisible, and in that moment, officially labeled a failure in their book. I swallowed the lump in my throat, blinked back tears, and realized that the people I'd called Mom and Dad had already chosen who mattered to them.
And it wasn't me.
That night, after leaving my parents' house, I sat in my small apartment staring at the walls, feeling like everything I had believed about family had just collapsed. The air felt heavy, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shrug off, and even though I tried to busy myself by washing dishes or folding laundry, my mind kept replaying their words. "You've never really made anything of yourself. We need to put our resources where they'll actually matter." It was like a broken record, cutting into me over and over, until I finally sat on the edge of my bed and let the tears fall. I wasn't the type to cry easily. Years of swallowing emotions had made me strong on the outside, but that night, I sobbed like a child who had just realized her parents never really saw her. Every sacrifice I had made, every time I stayed late at work to save money, every time I said no to vacations so I could pay my bills responsibly, every single choice to live with discipline, It had all been invisible to them. Michael, the golden boy who dropped out of college after 2 semesters, who spent money faster than he earned it, who had bailed on 3 jobs because the bosses didn't respect him, was somehow seen as the visionary, the one worth betting on. And me, their daughter, who had built a quiet but steady career in marketing, who had never asked them for a dime, was labeled a failure. I tried to tell myself not to take it personally, that maybe they were just blinded by love for their son. But how could I not take it personally when they looked me in the eye and basically told me I didn't count? For years, I had been the responsible one. The one who cleaned the house when they were sick, who cooked meals when they were too tired, who babysat Michael when he was younger, even sacrificing my teenage years so he could go out with his friends. I thought being dutiful, being reliable, being the daughter who never caused trouble would eventually earn me their respect. But instead, it only made me invisible. I realized then that my role in their lives had never been about pride or love. It had been about utility. I was their helper, their backup plan, their emotional sponge, but never their pride and joy. That realization broke something in me, but it also lit a fire. I remember wiping my tears, looking in the mirror at my puffy eyes, and whispering to myself, no more. No more begging for scraps of love. No more measuring my worth by their approval. No more calling them just to hear indifference on the other end of the line. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts to mom and dad, and just stared at those words for a long time. Then I powered off my phone, crawled into bed, and promised myself that I would stop chasing people who clearly didn't value me. That night was the beginning of the end of my relationship with my parents, though I didn't yet know how much stronger it would make me. Because when you lose the approval you once lived for, you either crumble or you rise. And I decided, right then and there, that I would rise, even if it meant rising alone. The first few weeks after I cut ties with my parents were some of the loneliest days of my life. I won't sugarcoat it. There were mornings I woke up, reached for my phone out of habit, and then remembered that I had no one to text, no one to update about the little details of my day, no family dinner to look forward to on Sundays. The silence in my apartment felt deafening. I'd sit at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the steam rising and thinking, if my own parents don't believe in me, then who will? It was a dark place to be, and for a while, I felt like maybe they were right. Maybe I really was the failure, the unremarkable one, the one destined to be ordinary. At work, I plastered on a smile, pretended everything was fine, but the truth was, I'd go home and collapse into bed, drained not by my job but by the heaviness of feeling unwanted. But somewhere in the middle of all that loneliness, something began to shift. It started with small moments, like when I fixed the leaky faucet in my bathroom by myself, or when I handled a tough project at work that no one else wanted, and my boss quietly told me, "Good job, Claire, you really saved us there." Those tiny victories didn't erase the pain of rejection, but they planted seeds of something new, self-reliance. For the first time, I wasn't looking for my parents to clap for me or reassure me. I was clapping for myself. I started journaling every night, writing down things I had accomplished that day, even if they were as small as cooking a healthy meal or finally organizing my messy closet. It felt silly at first, but little by little, it reminded me that I had value, that I was capable of creating order and meaning in my own life without anyone's validation. Money was tight, too. Since I had never leaned on my parents financially, I was used to budgeting, but cutting them off meant cutting off not just the emotional connection but also those occasional gifts they used to throw Michael and me, though, truthfully, most went to him anyway. Still, I didn't let it break me. I took on freelance work outside my regular job, writing copy for small businesses, late into the night. It was exhausting, yes, but every invoice I sent and every payment I received reminded me that I could build something on my own. Slowly, the self-doubt began to weaken, replaced by a quiet determination. I wasn't just surviving. I was proving to myself, day by day, that I could thrive without the people who had written me off, and then, as months passed, I started noticing something else: freedom. Without the constant comparison to Michael, without the critical remarks about my choices, I felt lighter. I could decorate my apartment the way I wanted, pursue hobbies without being mocked, and make decisions without waiting for approval that would never come. I signed up for a weekend photography class, something I had always wanted to do, but never dared because my parents used to scoff at unprofitable hobbies. Holding that camera in my hands, capturing light and shadow, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't just existing, I was beginning to live. Time has a way of revealing the truth, even when people try to bury it under labels like failure or disappointment. As the months turned into a year, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was transforming into a woman I never thought I could be. I was still Claire, the same woman who once longed for her parents' approval, but I was also someone new, resilient, driven, and free from the chains of constantly trying to measure up. My photography hobby quickly became more than just a weekend escape. I started uploading my photos online, not expecting much, but to my surprise, people noticed. A small magazine reached out and asked if they could feature one of my cityscape shots. Then a local gallery invited me to showcase my work alongside other up-and-coming artists. Standing in that gallery, looking at my own framed photo hanging on the wall, I couldn't help but whisper to myself, they called me a failure. Yet here I was proving every single word wrong, that IT wasn't just about photography either, it was about the courage to seize opportunities. At my day job, I began speaking up more during meetings, proposing ideas I once would have kept silent about. People listened. My boss started giving me bigger projects, and before long, I was promoted. Suddenly, the woman who was once the failure of the family was managing a team, making decisions, and earning respect. The pay raise helped me move into a better apartment, and for the first time, I felt stable, not just financially but emotionally. Every success tasted sweeter because it was mine alone, not handed to me on a silver platter like the $230,000 my brother received. And yet, even as I grew, there was a part of me that wished my parents could see me, not to rub it in their faces, but because deep down, a daughter always wants her parents to be proud. The irony came when Michael, the so-called golden child, began struggling. His $230,000 gift had turned into a burden when he blew most of it on failed business ventures. He called me one evening, his voice shaking, asking if I could lend him money. I almost laughed, not out of cruelty, but because life had flipped the script so dramatically. The sister they called a failure was now the one he looked to for help. I didn't gloat. I simply told him the truth, that I had worked hard for what I had, and while I couldn't bail him out, I hoped he'd learn that handouts don't build character. Perseverance does. That moment cemented something inside me. My worth was never defined by what my parents gave or withheld. It was defined by what I built with my own two hands. Months later, the ultimate twist came when my parents showed up at one of my photography exhibitions. They stood there, awkward and unsure, as strangers complimented my work and a gallery owner praised me for being one of the most promising local artists. I watched their faces as reality sank in. The daughter they dismissed, the one they refused to invest in, the one they labeled as less than, was standing tall, successful, admired. My mom's eyes glistened with something like regret, while my dad finally said the words I had waited my whole life to hear. Claire, we were wrong about you. But by then, I didn't need their validation anymore. I smiled politely, thanked them for coming, and turned back to greet other guests. The applause I received that night wasn't from my parents, it was from a room full of people who saw my worth long before my family did. And so, if you're watching this right now, I want to ask you, where are you watching from, and how would you rate this story? Because maybe, like me, you've been labeled as something you're not. Maybe someone told you you'd never be good enough. But let my story remind you, labels can be torn off, doubts can be silenced, and failures can become foundations for success. I'm Claire, I'm 32 years old now, and I no longer chase approval. I build my own path. If you've ever felt like the overlooked one, let this be your sign that you are more powerful than you think. And don't forget, subscribe to Outstanding Stories so you never miss the next journey of resilience, courage, and transformation.